Welcome to the tutorial for our daily review, question 3. Question 3 is asking us to find missing numbers or missing percents in word problems, and I'm going to teach you how to do that using percent rulers. Now, before I do that, I'm going to tell you that there are many different strategies that you can find the correct answer for these types of problems. However, I'm going to encourage you to use a percent ruler because using some relatively simple strategies, you're going to be able to work on many different types of problems that might look similar but often have some differences. Today, let's go ahead and look at 4 different word problems that might be given, and we can see how these things can look similar but also ask us some things that are different. We have 4 problems. One says, what percent of 80 is 12? 12 is what percent of 80? What is 12% of 80? And 12 is 80% of what number? All of those problems sound relatively similar, and we're certainly using the same numbers, which doesn't help. The first thing that's really important with these types of problems is to identify what does the problem give you and what is the problem missing. In other words, what are you trying to find? I like to use a strategy where I'm going to go through and circle or identify the numbers for my problem. So in this first problem, I noticed that I was given 2 numbers, 80 and 12. Then I also want to go through and identify any percents that I'm given. In this case, I have a missing percent. That means I'm trying to find a percent, and I know I have 80 and 12. For my next problem, let's use that same strategy. I'm going to identify the numbers, and I'm going to identify that I have a missing percent. And in this case, you can see that although these problems are worded slightly differently, they are actually asking us exactly the same thing. Let's use this same strategy on our next question, and we'll see if it's asking the same thing or if we're asking something different. This time, I'm going to notice that I'm given a percent. I'm no longer missing the percent like I was before. And I'm given one value of 80, but I'm missing the other value or other number. So I can tell right away that I'm looking for something different in this problem than the 2 problems that we just read before. Let's use that strategy one more time for this final problem. And we're going to identify again that I was given a percent, and this time I was given the number 12, and I'm looking for another number in this particular problem. Let's go ahead and see how we can use a percent ruler to solve these 4 problems. Here's my first problem, and I'm just going to refresh my brain and use that same strategy that we just described on the other page. And we know that we are given 2 numbers, 80 and 12, and we are trying to find a missing percent. Something we didn't talk about on the other page is that we're actually given something else. And that's kind of hidden because it's not directly told to us here. But we are actually given the number 100% here as well. Because in this particular problem, we know that 80 is going to be the full amount or 100%. So when I start to build my percent ruler, I'm going to put my percentages on the bottom and my values on the top. And 100% is always going to go on that right-hand side. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling this percent ruler out with some values that I know. I know that 100% is 80. Remember, that one's kind of hidden in that word problem, but we know it says of 80. That tells us that 80 is that 100%. I also know right away that 0% is going to be 0, so I can fill that in as well. Now my goal is to find where that 12 is going to go on the top of this percent ruler. And there are so many different ways that you can find that value. I'm going to show you one, and as we work through our other problems, I'll show you a few more, and you can use which whichever method makes the most sense for you. One of the things that I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to identify easy or helpful percentages when I'm working on these problems. In this case, I can pretty easily split my 100% in half, and I could find 50%. Well, I can do that by simply dividing 80 by 2, because I have two separate groups there, and they equal 80 when I'm all done. That's nice and simple. 80 divided by 2 is 40. So I know what 50% is, but I still don't know the value 12. I'm closer to 12 with my value of 40, but I'm not there yet. The next thing I might do is I might take that 50% and I might split that up into 5 equal parts. In this case, I'm going to divide that 50% by 5, and I'm going to split that into 5 equal parts. And now I'm going to determine what is 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. We can do that using the same strategy. In this case, 40 was 50%. I've now split that into 5 equal parts, so I could divide 40 by 5. If I divide 40 by 5, I'm going to get 8. That means that 10% of 80 is going to be 8. And I could use that value to fill out 20% and 30% and 40% simply by continuing to count by 8. Now, I'm really close to figuring out where that 12 is going to go. In fact, I can identify that that 12 is going to go somewhere in between the 8 and the 16. But I don't totally know where yet, but I have an idea. You can see that I wrote down 8 plus 4 equals 12. And I think I have a strategy of how I could figure out what that percentage of 4 was. Well, if I took my value of 8 and I split that in half, that's going to give me a value of 4. And a reminder that that 8 was 10%. So I'm going to split that 10% in half. And that means that 4 is going to be worth 5%. Well, once I've done that, I know that I can add my 4 to my 8 to get me to 12. And that means I'm going to add 5% to 10% to get me to 15%. And so now I know the answer to this problem, that 12 is 15% of 80. Now, a quick reminder that we had this question that was written on the other page. 12 is what percent of 80? And we determined before that this was exactly the same question. And so we've already answered this same question in this problem. Let's go ahead and look at a different problem. We'll look at the third problem from the other page and see how we can apply a slightly different strategy using the same concepts that we did with our percent ruler. Our next problem was, what is 12% of 80? Again, I'm going to start by circling numbers and circling percentages that I know. I'm going to start to fill in my percent ruler just like I did before. I have 100%, and just like we noted in that last problem, it's telling me of 80. So I know that 80 is actually 100% in this problem. And I also know where that 0% is going to be. Just like our last problem, I could split this in half, and I could determine what 50% was using the exact same method that we did before. Now, we are trying to figure out 12%. So I'm not looking for 50%, I'm looking for 12%. And this one's actually going to be a little bit trickier. But we're going to use some of those same strategies that we talked about in the other problem. Like we did before, we're going to split this into 5 equal parts, and we've actually already done the math for this on our last problem. We know 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and 50%, and we knew that we are counting by eighths when we did this. Remember, all we did to figure that out was take 40 and we split it into 5 equal parts, or 40 divided by 5 told us what each of those 10% was going to be worth. Now, my challenge here is that unlike the last time where I could just go 8 plus 4 equals 12, this one is a little bit trickier because I have 10% and I am trying to get to 12%. That means that I need to add either 2%, or I could also figure out 1% and add that twice. Either way would work. Again, there are many strategies to figure out what is 2% or what is 1%. In this case, I'm going to start with what is 1%. And I'm going to do that by essentially practicing the same thing that we did before. If I imagine that 10% is 8, I could divide that up into 10 equal parts to figure out what 1% was. So all that means I need to do is 8 divided by 10, and that will tell me that 1% is equal to 0.8. Once I know 1%, I could then find 2% by adding another 1% to the 1%. So 0.8 plus 0.8 is going to equal 1.6. That means I'm going to add 1.6 or 2% onto the value of 8 that I was given, or 10%, and I can answer this question by saying that 9.6 is 12% of 80. Let's look at our final example that we had on the other page. This time it asked us 12 is 80% of what number? In this case, we have some things that are a little bit different. I'm going to identify my numbers and my percentages just like I did before. But one of the things that's different here is, unlike my other problems that I looked at, it's asking me of what number. That means that that is the 100%, and that's also what we're trying to find. So right now, that part is a mystery. However, all of that being said, we can still use similar strategies that we've used on our other problems. I'm going to go ahead and take my percent ruler, and I'm going to split it up into equal parts. In this case, I'm going to split it up into 10 equal parts because I'm trying to figure out 80%. So I know that the 80% value is 12. I was given that information. Now, using strategies that we've talked about before, once I know what 80% is, I could certainly figure out what 40% was, and all I'm going to do in order to do that is split that in half. 80% divided by 2 is 40%. That means that 12 divided by 2 is going to give me 6. I could repeat that pattern again and figure out what was 20% by splitting that up into 2 parts again, and I'm going to find out that 20% is equal to 3. That means that 80% plus 20% is going to equal that 100%. So 12 plus 3 is going to give me the value of 15. And now I can answer this question. 12 is 80% of 15. Those are 3 very different problems, but that give you a strategy for how to solve those problems using our percent rulers. Make sure that you're using a strategy to determine what is given to you in this problem and what is being asked or what is missing in this problem.